Welcome to the Pink Hearse Podcast, a real and whimsical look at what it means to be fully alive with all the joy and chaos and pressure and vulnerability and beauty. Take the ride along with unexpected guests and be inspired to fall in love with your own unique destiny and meaning. Just when we thought we were getting closer, we realized we have already arrived. Let our host Zachary and guest Ruth Strassberg welcome us all to the place. We also learned that you can't spell truth without, well, I think you get it.
Ultimately, if you're just true to yourself and trust the universe, it'll take you wherever you're going.
I'll see you at the spot, she said, just south of heart and north of head. A fuzzy region, often missed, mistaken for a vague abyss. But if you know the feel, the difference between foe and real, where friend and foe put down their shields, wink and bow and share a meal. These symbol toys announce the game. It's fun to mispronounce the name. So hurry up and wait for me. I'll be right there. Just gotta do something real quick. This episode is sponsored by Kinda Sorta, an AI skeleton key to help you decode all religion, myth, and poetic babblings in order to see that we're all saying the same thing with different slang, and that you should remember that not only does the observer change the data, but that the data changes the observer, and therefore everything is true and not at the same time. Which means, ... I have no idea. Let's ask Ruth.
That's optimistic.
Our guest today is Ruth Strassberg, a lifelong friend of my dad and I, my poetry mom, and one of the most inspiring human beings I've ever met. To borrow text from her incredible podcast episode on the brilliant show Two Old Bitches podcast, Ruth is a seeker, a learner, a truth teller, and a listener. The different paths she has traveled led her to trust the universe with a sense of connectedness and contentment that are reassuring and inspiring, especially in these times of massive upheaval and global disruption. Ruth was a Holocaust survivor, a beatnik, a psychedelic pioneer, a warrior in New Age and human potential movements, and continues to turn over stones, including herself, in this kindergarten experience known as life. To begin, I would like to pull a quote from an envelope full of Post-it note quotes that Ruth sent me recently, quotes she has collected for a lifetime. Stay tuned for a book we are putting out together, weaving together some of these timeless gems. So the quote that I pulled right before we started here was from Plato. No one is more hated than he who speaks the truth. Welcome to the Pink Hearse. How are you, Ruth?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I see you're wearing pink.
Oh, you see me. I don't see you.
Zachary inappropriately practicing his invisibility again.
I'm wearing, yes, a sort of a tie-dye. It's very hot here, so summer clothes, you know.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. So settling in today with death as our chauffeur, we're taking a ride in the Pink Hearse, which is in the form of a time-traveling vehicle for this episode. Where shall we begin? How about here? After such a wild journey, which we will explore, where do you find yourself today in this moment?
Well, that's such a good and interesting question. I turned 81 this year, and it's really a different space. Obviously, we're always at the center of the same being, with everything around us changing. Even though our bodies change and we pretty much remain who we are, each part of life brings out a different aspect of us. And right now, I am not quite sure who I am. I am in a state of ambivalence between doing and being, although there's certainly no contradiction. But I'm still discovering who I am at 81. I've never been 81 before, at least not in this lifetime. When I turned 80, I really thought, okay, well, this is about preparing for death. And then when I turned 81, I realized I might still be here for a while. So all of these different things are at play right at the moment.
Thank you. I can only imagine. So we were talking the other day, and in anticipation of the episode, you mentioned being a chameleon, which my wife Molly relates to as well, and adapting, maybe not even consciously, just changing depending on who you're with. And it's such an honor that you said you would be comfortable to join me on this show because we go right to the place together. And when I heard the place, I said, that's the name of the episode. And I thought of Rumi's poem about beyond ideas of right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there. So to me, that's one way of describing the place. How would you describe this impossible to find on a map location that we are all consciously or unconsciously seeking?
The place is the place that is the same in all of us. Because ultimately there's only one thing going on here. And, many, many years ago, I on some psychedelic trip or another, I asked myself the question, if all you have is infinite time and space to fill, what do you fill it with? Everything. And what I'm feeling is that when I connect to people in that real place, that is the underlying truth behind everything, the thing we cannot name, the thing we cannot talk about, but we can feel it. And so, truly, to find those people where you meet in the same place, that's an enormous gift from the universe.
100%. And I remember my dad talking after one of our God Help Me I'm Awake coffee clubs, and he spoke to everyone who was at the meeting virtually, saying that if there had been a gathering like this when he was young, it would have just changed his life. And so, I don't know, of course, throughout time, we have all gathered and there's been many ages, but I agree how precious and rare it is, and hopefully it's happening more and more all the time as we go back to the place.
Well, one of the things that I think doesn't get enough attention or respect is the fact that we're a very young species. In the timeline of physical reality, we've arrived in the last couple of seconds. But I do believe we're an evolving species. The problem is that we've evolved so quickly intellectually and scientifically, but we haven't found the place yet for critical mass of people. But, that's part of the mystery that keeps it all interesting anyway. So I came to the conclusion a very long time ago that I had to trust the universe, that the universe was benign, that ultimately it's benign, and that me as a human struggling to make sense of things, trying to control things, all of the stuff we all do all the time when we're caught in our material selves as opposed to our bigger selves. What I felt with that was I don't understand anything. The truth is I have no idea what's going on. But I do trust that life is good. And that since I can't do anything and I don't know anything, and this was at a moment in my life where I just had a massive nervous breakdown and Um, but prior to that, I had also had an experience of cosmic consciousness. So I was starting from a good place. That really all I could do was to surrender to life and trust life and allow it to lead me. And that's pretty much how I've lived my life.
I love it. The eternal student.
Mm. Well, it is yes and no, because at this point, I'm not so much to looking to learn new things. I'm looking to become more.
I like that.
Kinder, more giving, more creative, and I'm not even looking for that. The truth be told, it's fine just the way it is. But since I've still got a few years left, maybe I want to tell my story.
Definitely. Definitely. Speaking of your story, I was thinking in the time traveling hearse that we're in, perhaps we jump back to the beginning, although linear time is most likely a side effect of this mortal coil. Can you speak to some of your earliest memories and the unbelievable voyage of escaping the Holocaust and adventuring to America? My dad, just to add to that, I spoke to him. He has always been fascinated by your mother, an unwed Jewish mother in Poland in the forest fighting against the Nazis. Displaced people camp in Italy, where you spent time, a place for people with no country, your father discovering you exist, Ellis Island, etc.
Well, it's definitely been a wild ride for sure. Um, I think that he may have conflated my mother with my aunt, who did spend the war in the forest, one woman with 17 men as partisan fighters. My mother actually escaped out of Ukraine into the Soviet Union when the Nazis came in. And my father, too, but from a different part of Poland. They were both heading east to get as far away from the Nazis as possible, met each other in Nalchik, which is a fairly well known town in the Soviet Union. It's in the Caucasus. And those people who are interested in metaphysics and spiritual truth and all that kind of stuff, it's also the area where Gurdjieff worked with the Sufis. So it's got that going for it. The part of the Soviet Union where I was born was also where Zoroastrianism, which was the original religion of Persia, was born, because there were natural gas mines and they would just break into fire. And so, a lot of interesting energy where I was born anyway. But my father had been married and had a daughter before the war. So he assumed they were probably dead, but he didn't know for sure. So they couldn't get married. I always felt that for my mother, being an unwed Jewish mother in 1944 was probably at least as hard as the Holocaust, because it was a different world for women back then. And it was a different world for women when I was coming up as well. The 50s and 60s were very different than they are today. This is part of why I say I see us as an evolutionary species, and we've accomplished some extraordinary things in the few seconds we've been on Earth. Anyhow, what was the question?
No, that's beautiful. Thank you. Just earliest memories that I remember listening to the episode of Two Old Bitches and just hearing the wild journey that sounds like a fairy tale.
It's been a wild ride. I sometimes joke that when it was time for me to come down to Earth, they asked me what I wanted. And I said, give me whatever you've got. And they did.
Yeah.
Because I went through, well, let me just tell you my earliest memory, because it will tell you a lot about me. My earliest memory, I would assume I may have been two 2.5. I have no idea. I know I was in my mother's arms. We were in Italy, which is where the displaced persons camp was. And I saw a hibiscus bloom for the first time. It was a very large bush. And Italy has a very similar climate to Los Angeles.
Hmm.
And this flower was so exquisitely beautiful that the reason I remember the event is because I think it's the first experience of awe that I can remember. I was in awe of the beauty of this flower. So that's my earliest memory.
Wow.
But in terms of the kind of things you want to know about, I'll tell you the 50s were completely black and white. Everything was binary. It was right and wrong, good and bad, black and white. That was the 50s. Then the 60s came, and some of us who couldn't bear the 50s, um, well, there were some people who were touting these things called acid and whatever, and I joined that group of people. So that was my 60s, part of my 70s, then again in the 80s.
Yeah.
It was, there's so many branches of learning, so many ways to try to understand life in the world. And psychedelics was one of them. And I am eternally grateful, because it just blasted open my brain and just allowed me to have a bigger picture, to have a larger context, to have a perspective that I could actually move around and look at things from different angles. So, yeah, that's my story.
Beautiful. Do you still speak Yiddish?
I haven't really had anybody, the older generation has been gone now for a long time, and there's not that many in my generation, certainly not many that I know. But I love incorporating a Yiddish word or teaching my friends a new Yiddish word or taking pleasure in the fact that more and more Yiddish words have entered into the lexicon.
Because I was wondering if you knew in Yiddish how to say pink hearse.
Pink. Well, I don't. I don't think I ever knew the word for hearse.
We'll have Kevin, our producer, my brother. He'll insert perhaps a Yiddish pronunciation of pink hearse here.
He'll find it.
Yeah, exactly. So you have a project that you've been developing slowly, not to put spotlights on anything that's slowly blooming in the shadows, but in my understanding, part of the work is tracing the arc of evolution, de-evolution, depending how you look at it. I see it as evolution from when you were a child to now. So in a Shakespearean nutshell, can you summarize this arc that you've been talking about, but as you see it?
In a nutshell, he wants from me.
Yeah. You know that great quote by Shakespeare about, I would consider myself a king of infinite space, were it not, even if my body was confined to a nutshell or something, if it were not for having bad dreams.
Boy, he coined a lot of words. I'd like to just correct a little bit what you just said, because what I'm trying to trace is not so much the arc of human evolution as the changes I've seen in our society and culture since, well, I was born in 1944, but I don't think I really started noticing a hell of a lot until we came to America, and I was 6 then. So I'll just give you one example. There was never a time when I wasn't asking the big questions. Even as a child, I was asking the big questions internally, not necessarily so much outside of myself. But at 15, but really all on a more spiritual or metaphysical of what is this thing I find myself in that we call life, that we call being a human. What is this? I didn't get it and I wanted to get it. And when I was 15, I was babysitting, and on the bookshelf was a little book called The Prophet by Gibran. So that was my first introduction to, yes, there is this larger, there is more information out there. There is more people who can tell me and make me feel these things and whatever. So at 15, I started the grand search for spiritual content, occult, metaphysical, whatever you want to call it. And there wasn't a hell of a lot of it around, you know. I mean, there were a few things, but it wasn't. You really had to search for it. Then I heard from somebody that there was a store on the Lower East Side called Samuel Weiser's that had carried this kind of material. They were pretty much about it. So I tracked it down. I went there, and it was literally a basement on the Lower East Side, kind of funky. The shelves were not completely full. They were interesting looking. There were even some couches to sit on and read. So that would have been, I would say, around maybe 59, 1960, 61 at the most. And Samuel Weiser's is now one of the largest publishers of spiritual and psychological and related content. Today, you will have authors like Eckhart Tolle or Deepak Chopra or Marianne, so many of them on the bestseller lists for a year, 2 years at a time. So just in my lifetime, we went from black and white. You were either a Christian or a Jew or whatever. That was it, I think, in America at that time. To clearly, I was not alone. A lot of people were looking to understand more, to expand themselves, to try to make sense of life. So these are the cultural changes I'm talking about. But also just in terms of our therapies, our health, I mean, so many different ways that the world has changed in my lifetime. And because I played in a lot of these arenas as it was going on. I was an environmentalist. I was a political activist. I was a feminist. I was just, whatever was happening in the culture, I was out there doing it. And so I think it's an interesting subject.
Absolutely. Incredible subject. And I can
But
imagine
now that
you
I'm saying it to you in this, I hope it doesn't sort of like tie my hands behind that I have to do it because I like the freedom of changing my mind.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's all play. I think from that place of allowing things to come through and in different dimensions, we can accomplish things, and who knows, no pressure at all. Thank you for summarizing that beautiful journey that you've tracked and been a part of and watched unfold. On the note of seeking out others like Gibran who are talking about the place, talking about the whispers, you and I, the teachers, the seekers, the mad ones.
Well, like so many people, the prominent ones, were the Krishnamurtis and the Yoganandas and Alan Watts. And then as we went along, more and more writers and people entered into, our picture expanded and more writers and teachers presented themselves.
Exactly. And one common affinity we both share is a love for collecting these vitamin quotes, if you will.
That's cute.
Michael Meade talked about wisdom quotes being like vitamins, how they kind of, you swallow them and they slowly affect your system. I know for me, in my understanding, that life does seem to be an awakening school, if you will. And perhaps we're here in order to contribute. I don't know how much of it is just for our own awakening / others. I'm sure it's all interconnected.
I actually have a very strong belief about that.
I'd love to hear it.
I believe it comes from Buddhist teachings, but I wouldn't absolutely swear to it. It's looking at the world as a school.
Exactly.
And that we are not here to change it. It is here to change us.
I agree, a million percent. So in school, you and I are two people who appreciate collecting these fossilized, crystallized, potent quotes that could take a lifetime to dissolve. My question in this case is, what is your experience with conceptually understanding something and then needing to experience it in order to fully grok the juice, if you will? So maybe all those books are out now. The Rumi poem about the field could be posted in a million memes. Everyone's talking about it. But Molly and I were discussing how different it is between saying it, it sounds nice, it's fun, and that's great. I mean, that's a great sign that it's out there. But sometimes I almost wonder if those hidden Sam Weiser, whatever the name of that store, beautiful shop, if that secretiveness made the seeker value what they were finding more, as opposed to when it's just everywhere and it kind of becomes a bit more meaningless. And I'm not trying to, again, so for you, just the difference between reading a quote and then over time living the quote and that connection.
We have all kinds of spiritual materialists who know everything and have all the right words. But, you scratch a little deeper, start going into some of the shadow stuff, and it really is not completely authentic, So I would say that better conceptual than nothing.
Definitely.
But the important thing is to have done the work on yourself, to have really gone inside, because it's not happening out there, it's happening in here.
Absolutely. For fun, if this is inspiring to you, as an example, this just popped in my mind, but the quote that came through by Plato, no one is hated more than he who speaks the truth. What is that, if it relates to, I mean, you wrote it down, so obviously it spoke to something in you. How would you use that as a kaleidoscopic lens through your own experience, if you don't mind?
Well, I'll tell you a little story when I first found this out. We had just come to America. We were living in a small apartment building in Queens. And a woman in the building had died in childbirth. I was 6 years old. And I was having a conversation with one of the neighbors in the hallway about how sad it was and what a tragedy, that kind of thing. And me, in my complete naivete, said, "Oh, I don't believe people die. I think they just come back as somebody else or an animal or a bird or something." And the woman went into total shock and anger. And where do you get ideas? What a crazy thing to say. Blah, 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 blah. So I don't agree with Plato that it is the most hated thing. But certainly people are looking, for the most part, to be as comfortable as they can be in their psyche. And most people really don't dig I don't know if most, but a lot of people don't dig a whole lot deeper than that. And, in the same way as politically, there are people you cannot tell truth about, whatever it is they believe, or their truth is different than your truth, or whatever. It does arouse strong emotions. It absolutely does, because our beliefs sort of define who we think we are.
Absolutely. I remember my dad talking about a noticing of friends throughout his life dropping away partially in his estimation due to, whether consciously or unconsciously, his ongoing death and rebirth cycle. And perhaps, again, for them, consciously or unconsciously, it was almost like, get away from me. I don't want to experience that kind of energy. transformation. I like my life the way it is. Fuck off.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We all create our own boundaries, and truly, we have to. I mean, it's almost impossible to incorporate everything. I
Of
mean, you
course.
really do have to set some boundaries.
That's where the madness can come, which I had my fair share of, and it becomes too much. So it's very important to honor, I think, the body, obviously, and the boundaries. But I do see now the heating up of the world, and Brother Anandamoy, I believe, who was Yoga Nanda's disciple. I heard a talk from him recently. What is that called? The Fellowship of...
Oh, self-realization
Yeah.
fellowship.
So he said something interesting about the cycles of the world and how there was the golden ages of enlightenment, then silver, and it descends down into bronze, and then the iron age is the dark ages, and that we're actually just emerging out of the iron dark ages into the beginning of the bronze age of enlightenment. Again, we're ascending. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant about being a young species.
Exactly.
We're just living in such an accelerated time, but there's a lot of important things we haven't really developed yet.
And so all of the heating up that we've seen, perhaps beginning with, there's been signs forever, obviously, throughout time, and there's moments where they're more extreme, but COVID felt like a big something or other in this time. And then just everything that's been going on, I see it as what we're discussing of the comfort that people, all of us, cling to in some form or another, some semblance of a cosmology that feels safe, a life, an identity, a belief system. But that's being cooked away. And so the only way now, not just for those of us who were born with this, call it what you want to call it, I like calling it a wonderful disease in this moment, but skinlessness, that burning need to ask those questions at age 15, it seems like the whole world is being invited to do just that. And when I spoke to my father about our episode today, and he's obviously a huge fan of you and loves you, adores you, respects you. He was talking about how impacted he was by the Italian displacement camp being this place for people with no country. You know how my dad is with words. He likes that idea of people with no country, just how powerful that is. And for me, I wrote a poem, very short. I just wanted to bring it here because it's about what I'm describing, where the world seems to be heating up. And so more and more, everyone is being asked, invited, perhaps wolf mother grabbed in the jaws, shaken. The poem says, all this talk of skin and metal, place and dogma, good and bad. These are the last tears melting, the last bit of moth body before the flame consumes, the last little haggling with the grouchy border patrol before you enter. Welcome to the country of your soul.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's lovely. Well, I do think that even though we're all in this together and there's only one thing going on, I also believe that each one of us has to, sort of like go through the eye of the needle ourselves. It's like old folk songs and country songs where you have to walk that lonely highway by yourself.
Definitely.
But once you've gone through that eye of the needle or climbed that mountain or whatever metaphor you want to use, then all the people who have also done it are those people you choose.
The time traveler family. Herman Hesse writes a lot about that, and he's one of the most poignant brothers of mine, who's affected me in his book, Journey to the East, in Steppenwolf, The Magic Theater, The Laughter of the Immortals, leaving the congregations, leaving the, church political parties, whatever it may be, feeling that ostracized fear, feeling that paranoia, going through the eye of the needle, only to reemerge, as you just said beautifully, to be in the congregation of all, of the greats throughout time, hopefully, back to the place.
One can hope. Yep. It doesn't matter what path up the mountain you take. You all meet each other at the top.
Exactly. We're all going to Chicago.
Yeah.
So going back to, let's see, the beatnik time of your life, I would say that Howl by Allen Ginsberg really woke up my poet, even, dare I say. I'd been writing, I was 15, I'd been writing for a few years, but when I read Howl, something howled back in me. And my dad likes to say, it's almost like I drank that poem down to the last drop and it electrified me.
Just reread it now. It's been a long time.
I saw the great minds of my generation.
Yes,
yeah.
That part, that's all I remember is that first line.
I remember he put the word jism in a poem and I was like, oh my goodness, this guy is out of control. Amazing. But yeah, I was just curious, any reflections on being a part of so many movements that you've seen, these waves?
It started with the beatniks for me. So since you mentioned Allen Ginsberg, when I was 15, we were living in Brooklyn. And on weekends, my friend Harriet, who was just as wild and crazy as I was, and I would take the subway. We would tell our parents we were going to parties or frat party, whatever. And we would take the subway down to the village. We'd change into a black turtleneck sweater and hang out in the coffee houses. And back then, the coffee house of our choice was called the Fat Black Pussycat. And, it was just lots of people all wearing black, sitting at at tables and playing chess and having philosophical conversations. And it was home for me. I always knew I belonged in the village. And as soon as I left my parents' home, I moved to the village, and that's what happened.
And did you meet any of those maniacs, any of the Ken Keseys or the Ginsbergs or the...
I met Tim Leary and actually became a little friendly with him many years later, but that's when I was living in Los Angeles.
Got it. Speaking of trippy Timothys, at some point I'd love to call in our brother, Mr. Wiley, and just shout him out a little bit if that feels appropriate. I love you, Timothy.
He was definitely one of a kind.
Yeah, he really was. So, yeah, poetry being the natural speech of the human soul is something that I learned through Michael Meade. And again, Ginsberg waking that up in me. I love that you and I are reconnecting over poetry. I love that we're working on, that you recorded some stuff for our new album, that you sent me these quotes, that you sent me an uncorrected proof of Jitterbug Perfume. I mean, I can't think of a higher honor, reflection, just affirmation for my path. So just grateful for all of that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I wanted to talk a little about the ambivalence you mentioned, the oscillation between that and kind of not knowing who you are at 81, but obviously you have turned over many stones and you have had, the cosmic consciousness and then of course the breakdowns like all of us on this path, back and forth. So I was a bit curious about the dance between being inspired and deflated, and the movements you were part of seem to have so much fire and inspiration. And then perhaps do they peter out at some point? And I know you are jumper cabling yourself back into a creative flow these days, but your experience with that, like it matters, it doesn't matter, it matters, my energy matters. And seeing that with people I love and respect, elders, that dance of like staying in the flow. Obviously, you're going to have lulls and ebbs, but what is your experience with that kind of, staying in the purpose, creative, inspired, how to engage?
I'm not a good example for you because I can go for years, decades, and really not be very creative at all because most of my energy goes inside anyway. But, everything comes in spurts. There's a lot of nothing and then too much. You just have to trust the universe. Sometimes it can take a very long time and you start questioning, but ultimately, if you're just true to yourself and trust the universe, it'll take you wherever you're going.
I love that. And like you said at the beginning, it's just seconds. Our time on Earth as humans is just seconds in the grand scheme. So what is a little bit of a lull here and there or a burst? I love
Well,
that.
it's because we're caught in the ego. We're caught in being a separate entity who very much wants things and tries to control things. And as long as you do that, it's really, really hard. But when you can relax into the trip, where you can be patient, where you can say, oh, it's okay if I don't get it.
So in that idea of, perhaps I've said this many times on the show, but I love the Michelangelo being asked about his David statue and responding that David was already in the marble and he just had to remove everything that wasn't David. And you talking about discovering yourself, becoming more at 81. And then I connect that to the chameleon energy or personality noticing that you have, and my wife as well. So I was curious about preserving our true self, whatever that means, or staying close to our essence, but then obviously navigating the realm. And I too feel very porous and affected by encounters, and I'm learning more and more how to be more boundaried, how to wield myself. So I was just curious if you had thoughts on the chameleon side of yourself. And
Well, I think I think it was John Kabat-Zinn. He may have been paraphrasing something older, but he said, "Wherever you go, there you are. Wherever you go, there you are." So it doesn't matter. If you've got yourself, in that place within yourself, really, nothing else seems to matter as far as I can tell.
I love that. And so whatever is changing on the surface is almost just like above the ocean, the little wind whipping up white caps, but beneath.
Yeah, I think it was Pema Chodron who said, "You are the sky. Everything else is just weather."
Exactly. I love that. And there was another quote I pulled before about stick to the plan, not your moods. That you
I'm
had
very
written
bad
down.
at that. I am very much given to doing whatever it is I feel in the minute, as opposed to long-term plans. So I wouldn't be one who could speak well to that. I probably wrote that quote down because I thought it was good advice.
Yeah. What I like about Mali a lot, we listened to the Ananda Moy talk and it's incredible, the Raja Yoga, style. But she studied that and went to India. And it wasn't enough for her. And so that's why she went into depth psychology. And she was kind of joking about how with the Raja Yoga practices, there's breathing techniques for waking up, breathing for this. And obviously they covet the bliss, the place. And I love that too. And depth for her is like coffee and cigarettes, complexity, that the oneness consciousness is only one of the consciousnesses. That really cracked me up a bit. Like
I like that.
I imagine some like quadruple infinite headed being leaning over the oneness and tapping him on the shoulder and saying, "You're very cute, you little oneness one."
It might be a oneness in one cell of the universe.
Exactly. So just holding that and kind of Michael Mead also talks a lot about this, not coveting, to use that word again, the bliss state per se. It's wonderful. And I think there's attributes to be taken from all schools and all quotes and religions and myths, but also accepting our humanity, the idea that desire creates suffering and that we're here to transcend desire and suffering. It's a slippery slope because Jungians or depth perspectives might say, instead of that, have suffering that's good suffering, like suffering in service of something, or have desires that are divine desires. So it's a very interesting dance you're making me think of with stick to the plan, not your moods. Well, that sounds nice. And ideally, you're going to keep your eyes on the
trying
goal.
to control stuff,
exactly. Now I'm second guessing our book. How do we put out a book of 216 quotes if we don't even agree with most of them?
Oh, well, I'm not saying I don't agree with most of them, and I'm not even saying that I don't agree with that one. I'm just saying that for myself, I've always lived my life very much in the moment,
Yeah.
And I know that that's supposed to be a very good thing on a spiritual level. But in terms of society and living in the material world, not such a good thing.
Yeah.
So, it all depends on the context.
Yeah, we'll have to write a sweet, simple preface that just, like a warning FDA label that these are to be taken lightly as little conversation starters in your psyche.
Yeah, and even truths are only true sometimes,
Exactly.
Sometimes they're not true. So this is why you need to have the place. You have to have that part of yourself intact because it will resonate for you. It will tell you what's yours.
And I think in the place, it really is kind of wordless, but it contains all words, but there's some sort of blissful silence that dissolves all of the thoughts that are trying to figure out or put a name. So it really is that moth body dissolving into peace.
And even if you can't get rid of the thoughts, you can also just, treat them like static electricity. Don't listen to them or don't believe them or, you don't have to believe them. You don't have to follow what they tell you.
Don't believe your beliefs.
Exactly. A friend of mine once said, to believe is divine, but to believe your beliefs, that's stupid.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, the nuance
That's a good
of that.
one, right?
I've told this story once, but I feel called. I was living in Harlem, and there was a man named Tony who was a Rasta, and he was such a powerful guy. And he had lived on 129th and Lenox, where I was for many years. And he talked about being there when it was one of the worst blocks in New York City, all the boroughs, and how he would walk through and nothing ever happened to him. But if you walk through a flower field and God wants you to die, you could be stung by something and die.
Absolutely.
And so one day he's walking down the street and a Jehovah's Witness asks him to stop and, talk. And he says, "I'm sorry, I'm busy." Continues walking. The Jehovah's Witness yells after him, "You're a sinner." And Tony turns around. He's like, "Oh man, okay." He's like, "Wait a minute. Your book that your scriptures you're trying to push on me, they say not to judge, right? I don't know if he was a Jehovah's Witness or whatever he was, but your writings say not to judge." The guy said, "Yeah." Tony said, "Well, you just did." 2, "Do you love God?" The guy says, "Of course I love God. God gave me everything." Tony says, "Oh, so if God didn't give you anything, you wouldn't love God?" The guy was like, "Oh." He said, "Lastly, you believe in God, right?" And the guy said, "Of course I believe in God. How could you even ask that?" And Tony said, "I don't believe in God. Belief is subject to change. I know God." And he turned around and left.
Mm.
And I always love that image of Tony.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Well, that's it. I feel totally comfortable using the word God, but for much of my youth, I didn't. In fact, I thought I was an atheist. I considered myself an atheist. But in truth, what I was responding to was the thing that Oscar Wilde, the reporter, asked him if he believed in God. And he said, no, I believe in something much bigger.
Oh, wow. Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I was feeling for, really until maybe 30 or so.
I still feel that way. I just think words can become so divisive, obviously, which is why I was joking in the beginning with the fake advertisement, but you need skeleton keys, individual skeleton keys for yourself, Someone who I love dearly recently said, you don't believe in God, right? Like, you're not religious. I said, "Oh no, I definitely believe in God." And they said, "But many gods," right? With this funny expression. And I said, "No, a higher power, But what I should have said, if someone says to you, "Do you believe in many gods?" with a bit of a judgment in that, you say, "No, I believe in many gods." I think that's funny, to believe in tiny mini gods. It's like the opposite of Oscar. Well, I believe in something much smaller.
Well, the word God has become so divisive, as you said. But if you already have an understanding of this thing is so beyond comprehension, or even, I mean, we can't even point to the hymn. We have no idea.
Yeah.
But God, as it's understood, especially in the Abrahamic side of things, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, really the three most destructive of the religions.
Yeah.
God is much smaller. God is basically a projection of man. And that's the other thing you learn is about the role of projection in just about everything we do and think and believe and whatever. So to the extent you know who you are, you can take ownership of all of that.
Beautiful.
And, at least you're not part of the problem.
Exactly. I saw a meme on Twitter during one of the big, I don't know if it was COVID or all the fires or war, and someone wrote, "What if God came down to earth?" And all they said was, "It's actually pronounced Jod."
Jod?
It was a joke. Like, God comes down to earth amidst all this chaos and says, and
okay.
And the only
like
thing
George
they say
as
is,
opposed to George.
It's actually pronounced Jod, and they left.
Jod. Yeah.
I love that. So
that's funny. Yeah,
so a few more as we wind down. I mean, this has been so potent, and I hope to have you on again and again.
Oh, thank you.
But a few more, perhaps big ones even. If you're interested or open, I would love to hear a bit about the Hitler story. But also, if you don't feel comfortable to talk about that, no worries. But
I'm still working on it because I'm trying to make it more than a page and a half.
Totally. Or just a bit on that experience, if you're open to it, with my dad,
sure.
Lisa, and
of
George.
Course, but whoever else is listening to this will know that David, your father, who is a very dear friend of mine, was there, and another two friends, George and Lisa. It was a time in my life where I was in a state of deep frustration because I just couldn't move. I literally couldn't move. I had no idea what direction to go, how to make anything happen. It was just a very difficult, frustrating time in my life. And I asked David, George, and Lisa to come and work with me to do what we were calling an exorcism, but it was really an exercise in trying to get me unstuck. In any case, they came and started doing, I don't know, sitting in silence. Your father reminded me that George was working on my head. Lisa was working on my feet, and he was sort of handling my abdomen and belly and that area. And we were working, just doing this in silence for a while, when all of a sudden, this really enormous presence, everybody felt it. We all felt it. Dark, heavy presence entered the room. And I screamed, "Oh my God, it's him being Hitler."
Mm.
And then I started spasming, having kriyas, and he wants me to forgive him.
Mm.
And I thought, like, how can I forgive? First of all, even if I could, I couldn't, because what the hell would my forgiveness mean in the scheme of everything that he has done? But, and I was sobbing and crying because something in me knew that I had to. That was my job. That was part of why I was on earth. I had to forgive him. And at some point I said, I do. Now, what had happened was, as soon as that energy entered into the room, I had 3 dogs at the time, and I lived on Mount Washington, so there were many, many dogs in the vicinity. And at the moment he entered the room, all the dogs inside the house started howling. And they continued howling through the entire episode until I said, I forgive him. And then everything went silent again. And so that's my Forgiving Hitler story. There's a lot more to it, obviously. There's everything I went through in trying to understand it. There's the internal conversations I had with my parents, with my aunts and my uncles. I had one uncle who was in Buchenwald, who survived the death march. My Aunt Frida, that I mentioned earlier, who had been in the forest with the partisan fighters. My parents, who lost the bulk of their families, all of that. I never had grandparents. I only had a couple of aunts and uncles because they were the survivors. Everybody in my family were survivors. So it was quite an atmosphere to grow up in.
Thank you. Wow.
Yeah, so that's the Hitler story. And but things we didn't talk about today are some of the extraordinary people I've known and worked with, and just incredible projects that I got to be a part of. So this has been a real mixed bag life, which is, I think, how they're supposed to be.
100%. No, big life. And I want to also, one of the other pieces you touched on earlier, when you turned 80, you felt that you were perhaps approaching death, but then 81, I got more life to live as well. But I was just curious, my wife's brother just passed suddenly at 41, and death can come at any time. But I can only imagine being age-wise closer to, it's different. Like, I've had fears of dying since a young child, but being my dad's age, your age, it makes sense that time is potentially actually.
Well, you're definitely winding down. You can see it coming, of course.
So I'm curious your feelings on that. This show is an exploration of elephants in rooms, and death is a big one. So if you don't mind me asking, your feelings on your own death.
Oh, on my own death, I have to admit that there is a part of me that's looking forward to it. So, no, really.
I know.
First of all, I would love to stay conscious. In fact, a friend of mine recently bought a one-way ticket to Switzerland and underwent voluntary euthanasia.
Wow.
I have my old friend Armand, many years, he died close to 10 years ago. His last words were, "How exciting."
Beautiful.
And that's really the way I would like to go. I also am praying for not too much pain and suffering. That would be good.
Yeah.
My mother died totally unexpectedly. Surprisingly, she was in great shape as far as we knew, and she had an aneurysm, and that was that. She was 68. So, I'd rather go the way she went than the way my father went, which was in and out of hospitals for years. But in terms of death, first of all, only this cycle dies, I'm not dead. The spirit is not dead. I'm not sure about the consciousness or memory, but no, I'm not really afraid of death at all.
And there's a part of me that has always been wondering and wanting affirmation of what you just said, that you're not afraid of that I will continue, the love in me, the things that I cherish, the people that I love, the essence of things.
Once again, there's only one thing going on.
Yeah.
That's that part of you.
Yeah,
the eternal
exactly.
part of you is the part that lives on.
When did that click, though? Because I've had many clicks where I was like, oh, yeah, this is for sure. And even listening to the telepathy tapes recently helped me.
For me, there was a little book I ran into, I guess, when I was in my 20s called The Impersonal Life. And it sort of came in with it had kind of a Christian aura, but it was not Christian in the traditional sense of Christian. But it was the first time I actually got a handle on the fact that I am God. That we are each of us a bit of God, or the whole God, because who knows how that works,
Yeah.
But once I got that little handle, I was able to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And at some point, I owned it.
At some point, I owned it. I love that. Wow. Yeah, I get closer every time. I think that's what this show, in essence, is for me, is me remembering what you just said, that I am a little bit of God talking to God. I love, there's a line in Franny and Zoe by Salinger. It's my favorite line. It always stuck out.
Drinking the milk, God?
Oh my God, you know it. Watching Franny drink a glass of milk was like watching God pouring God into God.
And that's all that's happening all the time. That's what's so wonderful about it. If you can, one thing I realized was that all the chaos, what appears like chaos, is actually perfection as soon as you tune in.
Wow.
It's the tuning in that's the trip.
Which is going to the place.
Going to the place.
Wow. So just for fun, this is random. I don't know if it's worth even talking about, but micro examples of life stuff. Somehow, one of my favorite treasures from my brother Davi disappeared yesterday, and we can't find it. We've looked everywhere in the house, and going to sleep, although I'm in a place where I can totally access the relinquishing and the letting go of material things much quicker than I used to. And obviously, I think of my dad losing his home and losing, etc., just putting things in perspective. I still had trouble sleeping, and I still feel this bit of disorientation and sadness around losing potentially this thing. So what do you feel about that kind of dance in this life, of that kind of, for me, a bit of amnesia, kind of confusion in that chaos of, things and stuff and bodies? Yeah.
Don't be so impatient.
I love that.
Yeah, it will, little by little, we let go. It's I always think of it like this, that, the first half of life is addition, and the second half of life is subtraction. And that you just little by little, you let go, you let go, you let go at whatever pace you're able. There's no right or wrong here. There's, you just, as long as you endeavor to honor the place and recognize the place. When you slip and slide out of it, that's okay too. because the place is the part of you that's you.
Mm. Have you ever come across a man named Christopher M. Bosch?
Bosch?
Bache.
No, I don't think so. There's like a vague, way out in the distance, just the echo of a bell, but I don't think so.
Well, he wrote a book called LSD in the Mind of the Universe. And he's amazing, man. And I love, by the way, side note, your correction of my eternal student reflection. And it reminds me of Hermann Hesse and my mom saying, at a certain point, you don't really need to be looking anywhere. It really is that kind of subtraction. And Hess talking about, I no longer seek in the books and in the, other people, but I will always be a seeker, but now I look in my own blood, basically, and I look in the
same
stars.
Thing, yes.
And that accumulation of knowledge, it's funny. As a joke, it's like you offloaded all of those quotes onto me. And the truth is, we don't need any of them. It's all placebo, but they're fun toys. That's the kind of symbol toys.
They're more than that, because along the way, they sort of deepen your understanding. For me,
100%.
I just the feeling I would get from a piece of pure truth.
No, you're right. And I do not at all by any means mean to demean them. I'm just saying I really like that.
They're not necessary, is what you're saying, and I agree with that. But they're a gift from the past, and that's
big
nice.
Gift, and you want to treasure that for sure. And I'm going to cherish both those gifts forever. But back to Christopher M. Bosch.
Yes.
What you said before this really reminded me of that, and I pulled it out recently, and I wanted to share it with us. He says, "What I experienced was the core of the being I am becoming in this incarnation. What I experienced convinced me that the circumstances of my life were filled with deliberate purpose and intent. I came away with a deep sense of being rooted in meaningful work and important relationships. I feel that I finally understand what I am about and where I am in my life. I feel grounded in a definite place with definite people at an early stage of a rich life. I am also taking away patience for my incompleteness. Everything I was seeing would be mine, but I had to be patient. There was no need to fight the pace of my unfolding."
Unfolding is the right word.
Yeah.
It's a spiral. Everything is a spiral. I was just watching a YouTube video about the spiral within our bodies, and how the fascia works. It's everywhere.
100%. So one last one, and I know you mentioned, the stories we didn't tell, you didn't tell, we can do that in the future, but I just want to reflect how what has come through really feels like medicine and magic for me. So how much I appreciate your energy and time.
So
and again, I suggest everyone, I'll put it in the show notes too. The episode you did on the Two Old Bitches podcast is really powerful and covers a lot of actual adventures and chronicles of your journey. So I think that'll go hand in hand for those listening to go check that out.
They specifically wanted to just talk about the early days of the psychedelic movement.
Yeah.
And, back in those days, I was just like right out there.
Yeah. Well, are there any last words on your heart that want to come through now as we close this ride?
I would like to quote Lao Tzu. And I'm doing it from memory now, although I do have the quote on my refrigerator, so I hope I get it right. Actually, I want to quote Lao Tzu, and I want to quote the Bhagavad Gita.
Great.
So I'm going to do the Bhagavad Gita first, actually. The Lord said to Arjuna, "Since you, like me, always have been and always will be, now ease into your Dharma and be that which you must be in this time and this place right now." So that's God talking to Arjuna before he goes into war.
I know that one. I haven't read the Bhagavad Gita, but I know that scene when they're in the chariot and he's anxious about having to fight against relatives. And that's what the Lord
Anyway, be
says.
who you must be at this time
I
and
love
this
it.
place right now. So that's great advice.
Seriously.
Yeah. And then the one from Lao Tzu from the Tao is rejoice in the way things are, be content with what you have. When you realize that nothing is lacking, the whole world belongs to you.
Man, what a way to...
So if I learned anything in life, I think it's those two things.
Thank you, Ruth.
My body broke on the shore. You drank me up and I found myself on the wrong side of war. And now the stars are upside down. Forgive me for myself, for breaking from the stream. Feeling taller now that I am on my knees. You got me speaking. Got me speaking in tongues for your love, for your love. You got me speaking in tongues for your love, for your love. You got me speaking. You got me speaking. You got me speaking in tongues for your love, for your love. You got me speaking in tongues for your love. To me like a chord and lift me up with your sound. My body eternally yours as you sing through my voice now. You got me speaking. You got me speaking in tongues for your love, for your love. You got me speaking in tongues for your love, for your love. You got me speaking. You got me speaking.